Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Monday, November 4th, 2024. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, a tax and technology attorney from New Jersey. On today's episode, we cover a heated legal clash between Trump allies and the 65 Project, Elon Musk's voter giveaway under scrutiny, Supreme Court battles by Facebook and NVIDIA, and a Pennsylvania ballot order. Let's remember, go out and vote. No, seriously, if you're American, go out and vote. And read today's legal news. On this day in legal history, November 4th, 1646, the Massachusetts General Court enacted a law that imposed the death penalty for heresy, requiring all members of the colony to affirm the Bible as the Word of God. This harsh mandate reflected a deep religious nature of the Puritan colony, which viewed dissenting beliefs as a grave threat to its social and spiritual fabric. The law underscored the colony's commitment to a strict religious orthodoxy, where deviation from established doctrine was considered not just a sin, but a serious civil offense. The Massachusetts Bay Colony was, at the time, a theocratic society in which religious and legal authorities were often intertwined, giving ministers and magistrates alike substantial power over both personal belief and public behavior. By criminalizing heresy with such severity, the General Court aimed to maintain religious uniformity and discourage the influx of non-conforming individuals or beliefs. This law was part of broader efforts to deter the spread of religious pluralism, especially from emerging groups like the Quakers, who would later challenge Puritan authority. The legislation also reveals the degree to which early American colonies experimented with extreme measures of social control, often in ways that would seem incompatible with later ideals of religious freedom. Though not widely enforced with executions, the law served as a powerful deterrent, shaping a culture of religious conformity and setting a precedent for laws that linked faith and governance. It highlights the tension in early colonial America between the desire for communal unity and the eventual American principles of individual religious liberty. This strict legal approach to heresy foreshadowed the eventual legal conflicts and philosophical shifts that would lead to religious freedom protections enshrined in the First Amendment. Ahead of the U.S. election, an intensifying legal dispute pits lawyers associated with former President Donald Trump against an advocacy group called the 65 Project, which seeks to hold attorneys accountable for pushing false election claims. Formed after Trump's 2020 election loss, the 65 Project filed more than 80 ethics complaints against lawyers involved in Trump's legal efforts, aiming to deter future claims of election fraud. In response, Trump-aligned America First Legal, or AFL, filed an ethics complaint against Michael Teeter, the 65 Project's lead lawyer, accusing him of targeting attorneys simply for their client affiliations. The conflict underscores how lawyers are once again at the center of electoral controversies, with Trump suggesting he would contest any loss in the upcoming election. The 65 Project claims its goal is to prevent misuse of the legal system, while AFL counters that the group seeks to intimidate conservative lawyers. Meanwhile, the AFL has taken other legal actions, such as challenging voter registrations and election procedures in battleground states like Arizona and Pennsylvania. Although many of the 65 Project's complaints have led to disciplinary investigations, several cases have been dismissed and some targeted attorneys remain active in election-related litigation for Trump allies. This legal clash highlights the growing stakes of election law as both sides brace for potential disputes over the upcoming presidential vote. A Pennsylvania judge is set to rule on whether to halt Elon Musk's $1 million a day giveaway to registered voters, just one day before the presidential election between Vice President Kamala Harris to former President Donald Trump. Musk, who has recently endorsed Trump, has been awarding daily $1 million prizes to randomly selected voters in battleground states, or at least claiming he is, including Pennsylvania, as part of a campaign promoting free speech and gun rights. The initiative, backed by Musk's America PAC, has been criticized as potentially violating state consumer protection laws and possibly federal election laws, as it resembles an illegal lottery. Philadelphia District Attorney Lawrence Krasner filed a lawsuit against Musk and America PAC, arguing that the program is unlawfully influencing voters and alleging that the winners may not be chosen entirely at random, citing two winners with ties to pro-Trump events. Musk's team attempted to move the case to federal court, asserting that it raises free speech and election interference issues, but a judge ruled that it would proceed in state court. The legal debate around the giveaway centers on whether it constitutes paying people to register to vote, which would violate federal law. The Department of Justice has reportedly cautioned America PAC about the program's legality, but has not formally intervened. The U.S. Supreme Court is set to hear cases from Meta's Facebook and NVIDIA, as both companies seek to block federal securities fraud lawsuits that could impact the power of private litigants to hold corporations accountable. Facebook faces allegations of misleading investors about the Cambridge Analytica data breach, with plaintiffs claiming Facebook failed to disclose the breach's materialized risk and instead framed it as hypothetical. Meanwhile, NVIDIA is contesting claims that it misled investors about the portion of its sales driven by the volatile cryptocurrency market, allegedly downplaying crypto's influence on revenue growth. The Supreme Court's recent rulings favoring limits on federal regulatory power could make the justices receptive to Facebook and NVIDIA's arguments. These cases follow a trend in which the court has reined in federal agencies, like the SEC, potentially leaving gaps in enforcement that private securities lawsuits might fill. Proponents argue that private securities litigation is essential to holding companies accountable, especially as regulatory agencies face resource constraints. Legal experts suggest that if the court sides with Facebook and Nvidia, it could limit the scope of private lawsuits in securities fraud cases, thereby shifting more accountability from private plaintiffs back to under-resourced public agencies. A Pennsylvania judge ordered the Erie County Board of Elections to provide ballots to as many as 17,000 voters who did not receive their requested mail-in ballots ahead of the November 5th election. The order came after the Democratic Party filed a lawsuit claiming that the county's failure to send out up to 20,000 requested ballots had caused significant delays, potentially infringing on voters' rights. Erie County is considered a crucial area in Pennsylvania, a key swing state with 19 electoral votes, where the presidential race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris remains extremely close. Judge David Ridge's ruling extended early voting in the county through November 4th, allowing the election board to use overnight delivery services to expedite ballot distribution, especially for the 1,200 voters temporarily out of state. The court also addressed issues with duplicate ballots, allowing affected voters to cancel earlier submissions and cast new ballots if needed. The decision aims to rectify complications caused by a contractor's errors and ensure that eligible voters can participate. In a bit of an op-ed on a topic I think is important. As you head to the polls tomorrow, I'm not here to tell you who to vote for. You have to decide that for yourself, and frankly, I can't imagine anyone would do much of anything on my say-so alone. Instead, I'd like to offer a few brief anecdotes that we've touched on before from the past to think about. Immigration has been a central issue in this election cycle, with some arguing that immigrants pose a threat to our safety and economic stability. But before making up your mind, I'd encourage you to consider how these same debates have played out in history. Each time we face similar fears and questions. Are immigrants helping or harming us? Are they a part of our communities or a threat to them? Let's take a look back at a few key moments when these questions came up and see if they offer any lessons for us today. In the full light of history, on which side would you like to imagine you would have come down on? What does that mean for your voting choice tomorrow? Chinese Exclusion Act, 1882, United States. Chinese immigrants were blamed for taking jobs from American workers, particularly on the West Coast, leading to the first federal law to restrict a specific immigrant group. Irish immigrants and the potato famine, 1840s, United States. Irish immigrants fleeing famine were accused of increasing crime rates and straining public resources, leading to widespread anti-Irish sentiment and discrimination. Jewish immigrants in Tsarist Russia, late 1800s to early 1900s. Jewish communities were scapegoated for economic hardships and social unrest, culminating in violent pogroms and restrictive laws. Japanese internment, World War II, United States. Japanese Americans were blamed for posing a national security threat, resulting in mass internment based on ethnicity, despite no evidence of disloyalty. Mexican immigrants during the Great Depression, 1930s, United States. Mexican immigrants were accused of taking jobs from American citizens during economic hardship, leading to widespread deportations, including some American-born citizens. Indian migrants in Uganda, 1972. Under Idi Amin, South Asian immigrants were blamed for controlling the economy at the expense of native Ugandans, resulting in the expulsion of 80,000 Indians and Pakistanis. German immigrants in the United States, World War I. German Americans were often targeted and accused of harboring pro-German sympathies, leading to discrimination and suppression of German culture. Italian immigrants in the U.S. in the early 1900s. Italians were often blamed for increasing crime rates, particularly due to the association with organized crime, leading to discrimination and limited employment opportunities. Syrian and Lebanese migrants in Latin America in the 20th century. In countries like Argentina and Brazil, Syrian and Lebanese immigrants were accused of taking jobs and resources, leading to restrictions and anti-Arab sentiment. These are just a few notable examples of past debates around immigration. As above, and in conclusion, I challenge you to ask yourself where you'd like to imagine you would have come down in these debates and vote accordingly. And with that, and as always, I thank you so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than Minimum Competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment, leave a rating or review on your podcast player. We'd appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in a story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice because it is certainly not that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here tomorrow, and until then, remember, vote. That's it, just vote.